Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I have the privilege of speaking to a public historian, filmmaker, curator at a history museum. Please welcome Joe Tropea. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here. As always, great to be here chatting with you and learning more about your work. And I want to start off. There's a new thing that I've been doing. Like I'll do the kind of, cut and paste kind of like copy of what that introduction looks like. But I really like to have the guests start off by really giving what they think their full, more robust version of an introduction is. And really in doing that, tell me how you got attached to and interested in like public history. So give me that description of like how you really see yourself, how you view yourself in this community and in the filmmaking world, and what really drew you to the subjects that you work within.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was born in Baltimore. I'm from here. I've moved away a few times, but always came back. I spent my 20s playing music in bands and touring around the country, and took a long college break. And then in my mid-30s, went back to school and thought that I wanted to study filmmaking or the history of movies, and kind of realized, that might not be so lucrative as far as finding a job. But I was very interested in history, and I was very drawn to public history. I went to UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and they have a very strong public history program there. And I pretty quickly realized that, you can be a historian and write books or articles or teach, or for some people become a park ranger. But in public history, you learn to sort of present history to an audience, and that it's kind of sounds similar, but it's different. And public history is a field that is very collaborative in nature. Mm-hmm. And, most of the stuff I find myself involved in throughout my life is collaborative in nature. Playing in a band is a very collaborative thing. Making music, filmmaking is super collaborative. So I was drawn to the public history program and did that, and was fortunate enough to find work in it pretty soon after graduating. Nothing lucrative. That's still grasping for that. But what I guess the other thing I liked about it is having like a public history day job allows me to be a filmmaker still, yeah. and do other things and pursue other interests. It's not always a 9-to-5 job, but it's not like one of these jobs where you're constantly, where you're working 80 hours a week and you just have no energy left to do anything else. So, all those things kind of drew me toward public history, just my natural tendency to want to tell stories to people.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like there is some overlap in there in what my desire in doing this podcast is, and like uncovering things, rediscovering things, showing people like, hey, this is what this was, guys. And just, you didn't know these things about Baltimore? Why do you know that? And, that's the thing those things that really interest me. And I think every so often when I'll have like folks who are about maybe the history of Baltimore, like let's say Anita Kassoff, as we were talking about a little earlier before we got started, or even like Molly Ricks with I believe Baltimore history or what have you, that Baltimore is a very old city, and there's stuff that this constant like rebrand. I don't know who Baltimore's PR team is, but it's constantly rebranding. I was like, what are we? Because it's like, are we just violent? Are we blue collar? What are we? Are we arts? What are we here? And I think there are different things that shape how people maybe view Baltimore, and from whatever standpoint. Like my dad is in his 60s and he'll talk about the railroad and Bethlehem still. I don't have that experience. So was there a life experience that maybe shaped your creative sensibility? And so tell us a little bit about that. And so let's say tell us a bit more. Tell us a little bit about that, but also if you could maybe touch on your process, whether it be in filmmaking, whether it be in like documenting history. What does that look like from conception to creation?
So I guess if there's an experience that shaped me, it would probably have to be moving when I was younger from the city to the county, or as I called it, the country. I wasn't thrilled with it at the time, and I was pretty young. And I can't say I hated every second of it, but I was pretty ready to move back to civilization when I turned 18 and was able to, decide where I lived on my own. And I think part of it was, honestly, for my parents, I think it was kind of like a white flight kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand it then. I went from having like going to a school where, it was a mix of people, to all of a sudden going to a school out in the county where I think maybe there were like 2 Black people. There may have been like 1 or 2 Indian people, and the rest, it was just all homogenous white people. And, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that per se, but it struck me as like, why did we do this? Why did we make this move? How is this supposed to make my life better? Being just bored off of my ass, surrounded by cornfields, and but yeah, I think somehow when I did get to move back to the city and feel connected to a community, I don't know how to put it in words any better than that, but I think that shaped my sense of viewing the world. And if I'm creative, it shaped my sense of creativity. Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure I remember the second part of your question, or if I answered it.
No. Yes. So the second part of it, could you walk us through, and again, the very like overarching sort of way, because it's you're not just a filmmaker there, because there's a lot that goes into that, right? It's not just, oh yeah, I make films, hard stop. So tell us about like your general perspective when you're creating something. Tell me about the conception to creation. Are you doing storyboards? Are you coming like with a note, grabbing the iPhone, let me put down a couple of things, a guy does this? Like, tell me about that process for you.
Okay. So yeah, usually because I'm a historian and I make documentaries, I spend a lot of time doing research, and generally that's on my own. Mm-hmm. But I may have the tendency to get stuck in research mode for too long and not want to have to start writing or like making the thing that I'm doing the research for. But I'll do that first, and then I start thinking about like who I want to work with, which team members can I, and I have to be realistic because I'm low budget independent filmmaker, right? So I generally don't have money to pay people. So I'll try to, barter when I can. Like, I'll work on your film if you work on mine. But I think I tend towards collaboration. So once I feel like I know the story, I start to bring in other people, and then I give up a little bit of control and say, well, maybe I haven't thought of the best way to tell this story. What do you think? And then we sort of work it out. Generally, if it's my project, I try to stay in control of it, but really I try to let it go where it's going to go. If I'm working on someone else's film, I try to, support them as best I can to help them tell the story they want to tell the best way.
Collaboration is a big thing, right? And I like hearing that. Like, I've been asking this question because we're so caught on what is this dollar amount, and we're very, I think, DIY here. Like, obviously, I'm podcasting, so that's another thing. It's like, oh, it's so much money, and it is so much money. I'm wearing a suit made out of dollars, there, Joe. But I think hearing working with people and collaborating, bartering, those are things that I think have been taken out of like art and creation and kind of can prevent things from actually happening, coming to fruition and realization.
Yeah, yeah, and I should mention too, like working as a curator doing exhibitions. That's a very collaborative process too. Having one person in control of how you're going to tell the history of something is not always a good idea, especially in a museum setting. You definitely want as many qualified and competent eyes on a thing. And if you can include the people that it's about as much as possible, like you're going to tell a better history or a better story that represents, as close to the actual thing, the actual events that happened as possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I remember working at a place years ago, and it was a nonprofit, and there's a lot of weird white people there, and they were wondering why different folks from different countries that they were operating in really didn't receive them well. It's like, because you're sending people from Indiana to different like parts of Africa. They need someone. It's like, how do I connect with you? Yes, I'm going to tell you about the diaspora. It's like, you don't like, what are you saying? Like, can you bring in a brother, please?
Yeah.
So one of the questions I have here, who are those lead people, those masters in terms of your creative interests, and have you met them and have you learned anything from them? You're a listener to the podcast, and you've heard me make a tit out of myself talking to people who are in radio, and people was like, oh yeah, I was really happy about that interview, wasn't he? So those would be masters for me, because I feel like I'm just soaking up information from them and how to maybe improve what I do. So who are those like masters for you and your creative pursuits, and have you met them and what have you learned from them?
That's a great question. That's going to be very hard for me to answer. As a filmmaker, I should have mentioned that I also worked for a video store for a decade of my life, and that really was my film school. I worked at Video American, which was just a tremendous 4-chain location that had every type of movie you can imagine. So, I mean, I have my people that I look up to as filmmakers that I probably most of them couldn't meet because they're dead, like Luis Buñuel, or Hitchcock, or Melvin Van Peebles, although I did have a really good phone conversation with him one time.
That's great.
But I have met some people that I have considered role models, and it's been kind of meh. Honest. I got to meet a huge fan of most of David Simon's work. Mm-hmm. The Wire, Show Me a Hero. I won't list his filmography, but I got to be his press attaché one time for a Maryland Film Festival event. And, I had actually done an internship connected to him at some point prior to that. He had no idea. And I was just wallpaper to him. Like, he did not notice me, and it was like, man, I don't know what I thought this was going to be like, but oh boy, don't meet your idols. And one time I got to interview Ken Burns when I worked for City Paper. I video interviewed him. Yeah. And I, of course, threw in the Ken Burns effect joke from iMovie. And he didn't laugh, and I didn't laugh. And, I got in pretty deep with him, and he told me about funding and how he funded his movies all through, corporations like GM. Mm-hmm. And it was really kind of depressing. I mean, he was a nice guy, and so was David Simon. Nice guy. But once I started hearing like the reality of what it's like to be Ken Burns, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be that kind of filmmaker.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I as a historian, I've been fortunate enough. I met like my historian idol, Howard Zinn. I got to interview him for my first documentary, and he was just the nicest man, so gracious and like, so just willing to like entertain my questions and let me stay for a really long time. So that was amazing, and I also got to interview Noam Chomsky, and that was pretty cool. Very, very nice, gracious man, also.
Yeah.
But yeah, be careful meeting your idols, because sometimes it's not always so great.
Noted. I don't want to meet any of my mid idols. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. A lot of the comedians, like I really revel at comedians and chefs. Those are the people that I look for. And because if you make me laugh, you have an interesting standpoint or something, it's like, oh, okay. And the kind of what you were touching on, it's like most of my favorite comedians are dead. So it's like, huh. Okay, well, won't be meeting Richard Pryor. I guess that's done. Yeah. And Patrice O'Neill is out. All right, fair enough.
Man, yeah.
And also, I'll throw this in there. You may find this interesting. My girlfriend has her old Video American card on the refrigerator at her house.
Oh my God! Is it the purple one?
I think it's green.
Okay, green might have been Cold Spring Lane store.
Yeah.
Purple was Charles Village, I think. So that's great, man. I don't even have mine anymore, which is a bummer. But that's cool.
Yeah, I took a look at it. I was like, why is this card following me? I felt like I was in the movie, The Number 23. I was like, because it was just after I did the interview with Kevin. I was like, no.
Right.
This goes back into one of the things you were touching on earlier about collaboration. So productions, in most of the work that you were describing, you're showing that through line of collaboration. Differences are inevitable. Tell me about how you productively disagree.
Yeah, that's another tough one, man. I really I think because I've worked on my own films and I've worked on my friends' films. I have a rule that, I maybe should state it up front, but I keep it in my head, which is that, if it's my project, if I'm the director and there's no co-directorship, I kind of want to be the boss.
As you should.
But not to the extent that I'm going to forge ahead and do something stupid that like someone I trust told me, like, nah, I don't think that's the right way to do that. So I think if it's my thing, I try to be in charge, but only, like within reason. I want to hear other perspectives and listen to other people's feedback. When it's another person's film I'm working on, unless they're about to do something really stupid or embarrassing, I just try to like support as best I can. And then like I've learned working as a curator where I often find myself on a team. In fact, the only time I've ever had storyboards was making a video for a fashion exhibition that we did a few years ago. And it's because we worked with a graphic designer who designed the show for us, who had experience as doing storyboards. Mm-hmm. And my role was to make the video for the exhibition. So that was great because I didn't have to do it. I can't draw, but it really helped having the visualization. And I couldn't do it necessarily shot for shot, but it was really a lot of fun working with a group like this where the burden wasn't all on my shoulders, and I knew what my role was, and it felt really good, and I'm really proud of how that thing turned out. But yeah, I think that's my general rule is I want to either be the boss or support or I want to be a team member. Yeah. And really I want to be a team player kind of more more often than not, even on my own stuff.
I agree with that, and it's to quote the great poet Dwayne the Rock Johnson. You got to know your role, and but literally that's the thing, and in working on some of these things, like I feel like this is my project, right, and me doing the truth in its art, and anything that I feel like I'm putting forth out there, I'm going to do my best to, one, if I bring someone on, try to collaborate. What's going to show you in the best light as the guest and give you as much runway as possible. And it's, in many regards, this podcast is a curated list of people I think that are doing good work, but also it's a commercial for them and what their background is and what their story is. So if it's an instance where I'm like, all right, you sounded really weird there, we might want to do a redo, that's how that operates for me. But really, I'm steering the ship, and but it's a collaborative effort in that way.
Right. I'm also happy to hear if I say something stupid, you'll give me the opportunity to take it back. So
yeah. It's just like let's just remove that joke. We can just reset. Tell me about Flickering Treasures, rediscovering Baltimore's forgotten movie theaters, and could you, in that, describe the film community here locally?
Okay, so Flickering Treasures is a show that we currently have up at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, and it is the show is based on a book by Baltimore Sun photographer Amy Davis. So it's her concept, and she has actually done this show at other museums. She did a version of it at the National Building Museum in D.C., and I got to go see that. I think I was there the last day it was up. But basically, what the show does is it looks at the history of the movies in Baltimore by looking at the theaters. Mm-hmm. So like for instance, the very first motion picture films ever shown in our area was at this place called Electric Park, and it was a big like amusement park type place, and they showed films like under a big giant tent, and this was like these were like Edison projectors and like very short films that like maybe 5-7 minutes, and they had a program of them, but then it developed to where, for many years, movies were shown outdoors and by churches, like places that had large enough spaces to get people and to be able to project films. But pretty quickly, it changed into like small indoor theaters or like Nickelodeons, as they call them. And then it progressed to like these big movie palaces, and where I work, right off of Howard Street, was like the Mecca center for like so many great theaters were in that particular area. But Baltimore still has some great theaters, but nothing like what it grew to. So basically, that show tries to look at the history of how we watched movies and how it progressed in this area. And we do that with photographs, historic photographs, mm-hmm. and modern photographs that Amy took. And we have some ephemera. We have old programs from theaters, and we even have a shirt that the ushers wore at the 5 West, which is now the Parkway. So, so that one's still operating, and the Maryland Film Festival did a great job of restoring that building and not ruining it, keeping its like historic integrity. So all these theaters I've mentioned are a big part of the show. Yeah. And it'll be up for another year. So I encourage, if you haven't seen it yet, there is a video that plays in the exhibition that is excerpts from a film I made called Sicky's Making Films about the history of movie censorship. I had a lot of extra footage from when I interviewed people like John Waters about, like going to which theaters they went to, what the movie watching experience was like. And a lot of the material just didn't fit into this documentary about censorship, but I got to double dip and use it in this exhibition. So, yeah.
It's pretty great.
So, and then the other part of your question is, what's the film community like here in Baltimore? I think the answer is it's weird, but it's growing, and it's growing in ways that it never has. When I say I worked at Video Americaine for 10 years, I got to meet a lot of local filmmakers that way, because like we're basically the archive of any old movie you'd want to see, maybe because of something you're working on. We had it. So I got to meet a lot of people that way. Previous to that, when I was playing in bands, I lived in this group house called the Mansion Theater, which wasn't a theater, but it was once a funeral home. And it was like this group house. 7 of us lived there. Most of us were musicians. Some people were filmmakers. And I would get pulled into people's films that they were making. Like, I need you to play a redneck zombie in my movie, and I'd be like, oh, I can do that. And I had really long hair. Sure, I'll be your zombie. But I lived in that house with a good friend and collaborator, Skiz Sizik, and got to help him make films. And he once a month would show movies. We'd have 50, 70 people in our living room, watching obscure, weird films that local people had made, or, underground filmmakers.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got to know, a lot of filmmakers that way. And it was kind of a pretty small community for many years. And then, I don't think it started with David Simon, but it seems to have, like, all of a sudden TV productions descended on Baltimore. It seemed like sometime in the 90s. And, some of my friends were taking professional jobs as set decorators, like joining the union and getting like good paying jobs making movies. And, a bunch of things were filmed here, not just The Wire, but like Veep. I don't know, too many to name. But but the cool thing about that was, if you were trying to make a film and you needed a crew, if the timing was right, like if whatever HBO show was finished production, all of a sudden there were these professional people in town looking for something to do. And if you were cool and they were cool, they'd come work on your thing, and you wouldn't really have to pay them like what they would expect to be paid. Yeah. So that was kind of neat. But then, then television kind of dried up on us a little bit, right? Like, in fact, where I work, we have the old Greyhound terminal building. Yeah. And we recently sold it, but for many years we rented it out to film production companies. So like Netflix was in there doing House of Cards. Yeah. Veep was in there, the HBO show. I'm blanking on the 12 O'Clock Boy movie, not the documentary.
Charm City Kings.
Yeah, that was a production there. So I think at one point, like, while Veep was in production, like Julia Louis-Dreyfus just happened to be in our lobby going through. And it's just so weird. You have access to all these people in town all of a sudden. But yeah, like I said, that kind of dried up a little bit. But, now it seems to be opening up even more. Like, and I think part of that is like institutions getting involved, like the Saul Zaentz Fund through Hopkins and maybe Micah are providing opportunities, if not through funding, at least through like an incubator program where you can get together with people working on stuff and learn together and bounce ideas off of each other. And, we never really had that before unless you were, happened to move into a group house like I did, where it was like an unofficial incubator.
Yeah.
So, and there are some great Micah's a great institution for filmmakers and artists of all types, but they're very supportive. And I've had over the years a lot of favors done when I needed like to look at an old 16 millimeter film. And they're like the only place that has a Steam Deck that you can access. And the film festival for 20 years now has been really supportive of the local scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's weird, and it's evolved a lot, and it's kind of exciting to see where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And if I can ever make anything again coming out of this pandemic, I look forward to being a part of it. I always said, like, I didn't take one of those production jobs back when I maybe could have, because if I were doing that kind of work as a day job, I'd never make one of my own projects again.
Right.
I wouldn't want to do it. I'd want to come home and do like anything other than that, probably. And now it is sort of starting to seep into my day job a little bit, where I make exhibition videos, or have to edit things for virtual programs through Zoom, that we put on our channels. But I'm hanging in there, and hopefully still a part of the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for walking us through that. So I think this next question and final real question will be a good follow up to what we were just talking about there. There are so many stories here to rediscover or uncover. Often I only see the dark underbelly of Baltimore, which can be very entertaining, very informing. However, Baltimore can be very weird, funny, and inspiring, all of those things. Run the gamut of emotions and feelings and all of that stuff. In terms of subject matter related to Baltimore, what documentary or fictional film would you like to see? Like, could you describe like really what you want to see more of? Because I think it's pretty wide net, and there's a tension in Baltimore, and there was a production that wrapped, and a few other productions that are happening. We Own This City just wrapped a few months back, and that's going to be dropping soon.
Yeah. Well, I have one of my own projects I was supposed to make before the pandemic, and the pandemic kind of put it on ice. But it is, and I have to say, I am drawn to the dark underbelly of almost everything. But this was kind of a lighter story. And I'm going to make it. I have a partner where we say we're going to do this, and we are. So I'm going to talk about it, and then feel more pressure to do it, because maybe someone else will hear it and try to steal the story. But I accidentally came upon this story of this guy, Lewis Mackenzie Turner, who worked as a newspaper guy. He actually he worked on the machines that printed the paper. Mm-hmm. And his side hustle was he had his own little printing house, and I think it was called Salt House Press. It was literally like in a salt house for an ice cream company. Like, that's where he kept his office. But and what he would do is he would make these fake book covers. So one example, and it's where I get the title for the film, is The Truth is Fireproof. And this, he faked a letter from Hitler to FDR. And basically the point of his letter was, how dare you criticize, Germany? Look how your country treats its black people. And, and it total fictitious, like, and then the crazy thing is that he printed it on asbestos paper and titled it, The Truth is Fireproof.
Wow.
So, a forgery.
Yeah.
And it turns out he made all these other weird front pages of books that he never wrote. He would just come up with a clever title and weird artwork. Yeah. And he would, he had friends at the Maryland Historical Society, which is the name of the place where I work now. That's our old name. He would know like the director, and he knew people at the Peabody Library also. So he would give them his stuff and they would put it in their collections. And I found that we had a collection of Louis Mackenzie Turner. And, you know, it's just all this crazy, weird artwork, like graphic and weird little poems that he wrote and printed himself. But then it turns out he previously had worked at the Library of Congress in the 1890s and was involved in one of the largest archive robberies. He basically got the keys to his boss's office and stole all these really important, along with a partner, stole these like founding fathers documents out of his boss's office. Now, this is how lax archives were, right, back in the 1890s. And he would sell them, and he would make up stories as to how he got them. And they got caught.
Yeah.
And because him and his partner turned on each other, neither of them ever really, they couldn't prove, like, it's a very murky trail on all this, but he couldn't prove who really was the main thief. Right. So they got away with it. And it's like the ultimate story of white privilege. Yeah. Like, you stole like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson letters and journals, sold them, profited from them, and never had to pay the price. Wow. So yeah, this guy is just fascinating. And we're supposed to make a short documentary about it. And I hope we do.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thanks.
No pressure.
Yeah, right.
So, with that being said, I think it's time for some rapid fire questions.
All right, let's do it.
And you know how this works.
Yeah.
Favorite documentary?
Oh man, wow! This is such a Sophie's Choice thing for me. Like, which child would I give up? I'll off the top of my head, I'll say Harlan County, USA, which is about this coal mine strike in West Virginia. I'm so blanking right now. The Burden of Dreams, which is about Werner Herzog making his movie Fitzcarraldo, where he has to drag a steamship up a mountain and down the other side to get it from one body of water to another. Oh, wow. And like people in his crew who are like, this takes place in South America. Mm-hmm. The people in his crew got killed dragging this ship. Wow. And like, it's just this crazy story of him questioning why he made this film. And, you know, and it's Werner Herzog. So it's his wit throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So, okay. I could keep going. I'm just going to stop there.
Since you touched on it earlier with the exhibition that's happening right now, that's happening for the next year or so, tell me your favorite Baltimore theater of all time. It could be something that doesn't exist anymore, something that's currently around. Where is the place you'd like to see movies? Where's your favorite movie house?
Well, you know, I should say the Parkway, and it kind of is. And if that's kind of a backhanded compliment, I'll say this. What used to be my favorite place to sit for a movie was the front row of Theater One at the Charles Theater before they got the new seats. Oh. The new seats ruined it. I mean, they're way more comfortable. The old chairs were just awful. I mean, you wouldn't fall asleep watching a movie, even a bad movie. You couldn't fall asleep because they were so uncomfortable. But the way the front row, it was just far enough away from the screen that you weren't craning your neck, but, you know, no one could sit in front of you. You had all the leg room in the world, and it just felt like you were in the best, like, you know, better than the living room because it's a theater, but like just the most comfortable. No one's going to walk in front of you. No one's going to crowd you out. Yeah, that was it for me. It was the Charles, and I still love the Charles. I like their new seats; they're very comfortable. But yeah, it was Theater One, Row One at the Charles before they got new seats.
Dig it. Lastly, And this might be political. Crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
Oh man, it depends on what you're using it for.
When I wrote this question, I was thinking a peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah, I would go crunchy on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But I used to have this really terrible treat that I enjoyed,
Spin it.
which was to take 2 frosted Pop-Tarts and put either Nutella or peanut butter between them and make a disgustingly delicious dessert sandwich. And you really, crunchy didn't work for that, so
No.
it'd have to be creamy. But yeah, crunchy.
Yeah, I'm a crunchy guy, but it depends on the jelly. If
Right.
it's like a strawberry jelly, like a strawberry preserves, always crunchy. But
Yeah.
if it's like something of lesser repute, I can just creamy, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much all I had. And I want to thank you for being on this podcast. And 2, I want to invite you to tell the fine folks where to check you out, check out your work.
Yeah, wow. I have a website for my last feature called Sickies Making Films. It's www.sickiesmakingfilms.com. I'm on Instagram as the man with the gray flannel pit bull. And I have most of my projects are on Facebook. So, but yeah, I need a website is what I'm learning here. Which my wife loves to remind me. So one of these days we're gonna get on it and do that.
Absolutely. That's great. So yeah, thank you. So for Joe Tropea, I am Rob Lee, saying that there is film, community, culture, history in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.